So some big changes are coming. Okay, so with that, obviously the flood maps are very important. And let me back up a second. That's kind of where maybe my group can be an asset or a benefit to you guys. Again, I'm with the Department of Natural Resources Division of Water. We help to coordinate the National Flood Insurance Program here in Indiana. We deal with the floods, we come in afterwards. We deal with primarily with the local officials, but we're also a partner in what initially was called MAPMOD, and now it's called RISC-MAP, which is a national initiative to try to upgrade our flood maps, to make it more accurate, to show really where the risk is at. And DNR, Division of Water specifically, has been a partner in doing that. We've been on it's been a number of years now, process of trying to upgrade every county map here in Indiana. And this map, and I'll tell you how to get to it in a second, it kind of gives you a status as to where we're at. The yellows, just to make it easy, those are the ones that have been completed. They went from mapping that was 20, 30 years old to newer maps. They actually have aerials, you can see the structures. If we had better data, elevation data, for example, or a detailed study that had been done, we try to reflect those in these new maps. Okay? And so I'm sensing most of you guys is the Indy satellite county kind of thing here. If you look, we're here in Marion County. Marion County is still at what we call preliminary. They've not actually been deployed yet. Okay, we look for those optimistically to come out in the next year. Okay, the other counties, again, the yellows are in completion. The greens are the ones that we've had, and it's a very long process. We have public meetings, we solicit input from the local officials, and has to go through an appeal process. Thus, where the greens are at this point. Okay, so what you can do after today, if you forget everything else that DNR and I said, you can go to our website actually. Okay, DNR Division of Water. And if you go to that site, there's two nice little buttons on there. The first button gets you a version of this map, and it's called the Indiana Floodplain Mapping button. Wait, really high tech there, right? Huh? If you go to the Indiana DNR at the Division of Water. Sorry, I didn't write the actual link down, but it's pretty easy to find. And then from there, you can, this map will come up and say you want to know about Hamilton County and where they're at. Simply click on the map, and it'll give you detailed information on where we're at in that process. Local contact information, because you want to talk to a local floodplain official, and which one of our engineering teams is working on that map. Okay. The other button I wanted to bring up, right next to it, is something called the Indiana Floodplain Information Portal. That's a new thing we've got out. It's kind of neat. What we've tried to do over the years is we're always collecting information on flood heights and things of that nature. Well, we've managed to merge that in with the GIS system. So now, if you go to this site, you can actually either by typing an address or just drill down on, zoom in on the mapping, you can see if we have any base flood elevation data available. And why that's really important, I'm trying to think how I can state just what you guys might need, is that, say for example, I have a client and his house turns out it's in the floodplain, and it's one of these pre-firm structures built before the maps. And so they might have an issue. Well, if they want to look at that, getting a letter of map amendment, which is FEMA's process of getting out on that. I think maybe my colleague here will speak maybe on that a little bit. But you need two things. You need to know the flood height, okay, and you need to know the elevation of the structure. Okay. So this side anyway, if we have data, you can kind of cheat and look a little bit to see about what kind of flood height are we talking about. Okay, now to make it official, we have to do an actual determination, a letter and all that, and an actual elevation certificate, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But it's a way that at least you can kind of maybe help that client to understand what's the peril. Am I talking 2 feet? Am I talking 10 feet? And how that's going to really affect you when it comes to the insurance side. So with that, I'll keep it short and sweet. I'm a government guy, I talk too much, so I'll stop. And I'll turn it over to our next speaker.
Awesome. Okay, so you may have heard Greg's take on you get to buy flood insurance. I think a lot of people feel like we have to buy flood insurance, but really it is something that could be very beneficial when that eventual flood happens. Without flood insurance, clients people with homes in that area may be able to get a low interest rate loan, but it's still a loan for their repairs. A flood insurance policy works like a regular insurance policy. If there's a flood, then that structure gets rebuilt with the policy. So it really is, from the government's perspective, a good thing that we're able to get flood insurance and be able to protect our homes. But I know that it doesn't always feel that way, and it may feel less that way after you see my slides. So don't shoot the messenger. Remember, I live in the area too, so I am a victim as well as a representative of National Flood Insurance Program. Okay, lots of terminology. In our office, when we talk about flood and we really get into the details, the term "my head's about to explode" comes out often. So try and bear with us and gather some of the big points here. But This pre-firm versus post-firm is one of the most critical things to understand with respect to how all of these new rules are going to impact your future deals. Firm is flood insurance rate map. So every time you hear the word firm, just think pre-firm is before the map, post-firm is after maps were created. Most of the maps were created in the 1970s. Individual communities may be in different years, but sometime in the 70s is a pretty good estimation. Homes that were pre-firm structures, so anything that was built prior to 1970 is what we're talking about, these rules really impacting. Anything that are post-firm structures, if the property was built after 1970, when the map was already there were already regulations with respect to how they had to build that structure. It's already built to flood standards. They already had to have an elevation certificate. So those really aren't the properties that we're talking about right now, okay? So we're talking about pre-1970-ish structures. Before BW12, they received subsidized rates, as Greg was talking about. So basically, the government said, well, it wasn't your fault. You didn't know when you built that structure or when you bought that structure that somebody else built. You didn't know that it was even in a floodplain. So when you built it with a basement, we'll cut you some slack. And we'll go ahead and let you insure it at a more modest rate, if you will. It's not the actual risk. It's not the actual rate for that structure. So they are considered subsidized rates. BW12 requires the NFIP to get rightfully funded and charge the proper rates for those risks is essentially what they're doing. So elevation certificates are obviously needed, or else you don't know what the proper elevation of that structure is relative to where the waters are going to go. And so we have to have an elevation certificate in order to determine the full risk rates, okay? So we're talking about pre-1970s structures that used to be on subsidized rates that are going to be losing those subsidized rates.